Great. Hi, I'm Kevin Hutchison, and I'm here today to talk about habitat photography for the EcoFest Photo Fest. And I'm going to hopefully share some images with you and see if we can improve your photography skills outside. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and share my screen with you, courtesy of April Daniels, because I'm technically incompetent. And there we go. Excellent. Okay. So one of the things that we have to define in photography is what we're actually doing in photography. And what we do is very simple. We're the modern day cave painters. We tell a story. Our images tell a story. And hopefully it's a powerful story. It's a story that we want to convey. It's a story of what we saw, where we were, what we did, how we felt. Something that's going to emit maybe an emotion with the viewer that we show them to. And to do this, we have to understand the tools that we have available. Now, in the old days when the cave painters, since I mentioned cave painters painted, they had pigments and water and all kinds of things. And as time progressed and we started having the old masters painting, again, they had paints and pigments and all kinds of things. As photographers, we have one tool and one tool only. And you need to understand this if you plan on being a good quality photographer. And the tool that we have is very simple. It's light. That's all we have to work with is light. Whether it's light that we bring to the table with electronic flashes or with constant burning lights or something else, or whether it's nature's light, the sun. That's all we have to work with. And so because of that, we have to learn how to manipulate that and how to use that to our advantage. Now, there have been many people throughout the history of photography that have tried to explain light different ways. Ansel Adams came up with the zone system, which is kind of archaic now that we have digital photography, but still very important. And I would recommend for those of you that are serious about your photography to look that up. It's called the zone system, and it's an amazing way to actually control the light in your photographs. But anyway, so what I want to do is I want to talk a little bit about light first and where to place light. Now, one of the golden rules that you've always been told about photography is never ever shoot directly into the sun. Well, as you can see by the image that I have up, I did just that. I shot directly into the sun. And you can also see that that image is a very powerful image. I think it's great. It's one of my favorites from the day that I took these folks out fishing. And it conveys what the day was like. It was a sunny day. It was kind of contrasty, a lot of dark shadows, a lot of bright highlights, and that really conveys it. So controlling the light here, breaking one of the golden rules of photography, which was never shooting into the sun, actually works. So don't be afraid to take some chances. Don't be afraid to do things that don't make sense at the time. One of the great things about digital photography is it costs nothing as far as images go. In the old days when we shot on film, everything was expensive. You had to buy the film, you had to shoot the photos, you had to hope they turned out, you had to process them, you had to have proof prints made. It was all expensive. Now you just take your digital camera, you hold it up, you don't like the image on the viewfinder, you hit delete and it's over. It didn't cost you anything. So take risks, take chances. Here's another good use of light. This bird I saw sitting in the middle of the river, thought it looked nice, went ahead and wanted to take the photograph. This is one version. This is having the sun behind me, over my shoulder, exactly the way they tell you you're supposed to do your photography. And the next one, again, I'm shooting directly into the sun. So now the bird is almost a complete silhouette. There's still some detail on the bird, but if you look back from this one, much more detail. You can see the plumage of the bird. It's gorgeous. This bird was basically one color. no amazing plumage, no nothing. So much better as a silhouette. So instead of moving myself to the opposite side of the bird and photographing it, which I thought was kind of dull, I actually did. But I didn't show those photos because they're basically dull. This one's a much nicer photograph. Here's another example of using light to control your photograph. This was one of the frosts that we had this year, just some pine needles. Now this was all available light. So you can see the translucence of the ice on the pine needles. You can see the pine needles underneath. Now, I wanted to see what it would look like if I added a fill-in flash, just taking an off-camera flash, turning it way down to about a 16th power. That's what you get. Completely different. Same setup, same exact, everything was the same. I didn't do anything other than add in the strobe. Which one's better? You be the judge. I kind of like this one myself. You may like this one more. Either way, you're still seeing all the detail. You're still seeing the green. You're still seeing the ice. But on this one, the background is very much minimized because it's much darker. I'm drawing much more attention to the pine needles. Whereas this one, a little more monochromatic, maybe not the best photograph. This one, much better. And all I did was simply add in an electronic strobe. That's it. Let's go to another one. Nature is going to provide you with an amazing amount of light differential. From sun up to sundown, the light is always constantly changing. And I know you've probably heard the term golden hour when you have that golden light in the morning and that golden light in the evening. Very much true. This is the Colorado River in Weberville. I happened to be there in the morning getting ready to launch on a trip, and it was amazing. You know, the fog was coming up. There was a big temperature difference between the water and the ambient temperature. So you were getting all that residual fog coming off the water. The light was perfect. Everything was perfect. Very powerful image, very simple image. No manipulation needed, no Photoshop needed. This image was right there. All I had to do was take it. And I did bracket this image. And if you're not familiar with bracketing, that is shooting multiple exposures of the same scene just to make sure that you get exactly the look that you want. I recommend doing that. Some cameras like mine have a bracketing mode where you can set it to photograph one click of the shutter and it takes 3 photographs, one stop under, one stop over, and the exposure that it thinks it should have. But again, very simple photograph, very powerful photograph. This is storytelling. You get the feeling of this morning. You can feel it. You can feel the temperature. You can feel the fog. You can feel that morning light. Everything here works. Again, another spot. And this, I'm going to talk a little bit about pre-planning photographs. A lot of times you look in a magazine and you see a photograph and you think, oh my God, that's beautiful. You know, that guy just showed up and snapped that picture. And that's not the way it works a lot of times. This photograph, I waited about 20 minutes for this boat that I knew was coming down the river to get to the exact spot that I wanted it to get to. And luckily the fog held up, everything held up, and it was beautiful. But I waited on this. I waited and waited until they were exactly the way I wanted to. In this sequence of photographs, there is about 30 photographs. The rods are in different positions, the people are in different positions, the oars are in different positions. I picked the one that I liked the best, but it never would have happened had I not seen that boat coming and pre-visualized that picture. I knew what it was going to look like before I took it. I just had to wait for it to happen. And very often in all forms of photography, whether it's outdoor photography, photographing habitats, photographing people, does not matter. Pre-planning, being able to pre-visualize what the photograph is going to look like is a huge advantage. One of the other things that we can do is we can change our perspective. Obviously, you're going to notice there's a lot of fish pictures in all of my habitat photographs, and that's simply because I own a fly fishing business and I photograph a lot of fish. I kind of view them as my little employees, so that's why I take such good care of them, and I enjoy taking photographs of them. But very rarely do you see a photograph of a fish like this. Most of the time you see a photograph of a guy holding a fish and he's all proud of it, and et cetera, et cetera. These I call fish portraits. These fish are absolutely stunningly beautiful, and they're part of the habitat. They're part of nature. They're part of what I want to document. And so changing my perspective, getting in close, using a macro lens and getting in as close as I want. Same fish. This fish further down towards its belly looks like this. It's, again, an amazing fish, but I get in nice and close. Having a macro lens, understanding how to use it is a real bonus. Now, for those of you that are shooting on your phones, all the new phones, almost all the new phones have macro mode, and this is what it does. It allows you to get in close and show something more abstract. Abstraction sometimes is a very useful tool when you're photographing habitat or you're photographing outdoors. Don't be afraid to shoot this photograph, but shoot this photograph also. Here's another one. This is called a red-eared sunfish for obvious reasons. Another beautiful picture, just in close. Even if you don't know anything about fishing, you know what this is. You've got the reference down in the left corner where you have the fin. You understand what it is. You know what it is. But as an abstraction, it's very beautiful. Again, you can abstract all kinds of things. Here's some granite. This is out near Pedernales. Very pretty rock formations, gorgeous stuff. Abstract it. Don't just take a picture of the hillside. Get in close. Make it something different. Make it interesting. Again, you've got lichen growing on the rocks. That was maybe 15 feet away from the other stuff that I photographed, that last one I showed. Show this off. You know, this is part of what you're seeing when you're out there. Tell that story. Show the details of that story. Barbed wire, pretty much prevalent everywhere in Texas. And, you know, you can curse it, you can hate it, or you can kind of work with it. And so I've got a sequence here, I think 3 or 4 photographs of a barbed wire fence that I saw, and I just kind of shot it from different perspectives. This one with the T-post in the background, using selective focus where I used a very narrow depth of field. In the last one, again, the difference in the lighting in all of these, this is all the same time, all the same place, all the same barbed wire. Simply by moving my position, placing the sun in different positions, and manipulating my exposures, I come up with 3 very different photographs. But still, for a boring barbed wire fence, I think it turned out pretty good. Here's another selective focus. This is another ice storm on a cow fence using selective focus, very narrow depth of field. This, I like using narrow depth of field. It's one of my favorite things to do. I shoot a lot of portraiture outside, and I really enjoy shooting things with very narrow depth of field. And again, this is where pre-visualization comes in. You see that photograph. I saw that photograph before I took it. I knew what I wanted to do. I knew that I wanted to blur the background out. The background's boring. It doesn't add anything to the photograph. What's important here is the ice hanging off that fence. That's sharp. That's in focus. Use selective focus. If you don't know how to do it, practice it. Learn how to do it. Learn how your f-stops affect your depth of field. Changing perspective on things, looking at them from different angles. Elephant ears all over the rivers that I fish. Just getting up on shore instead of photographing them from the water, getting up on shore and photographing them. They're beautiful, they're invasive, and they're horrible plants, but they are beautiful. And just changing things up a little bit, making things look a little bit different. Again, getting in close on the fish. Showing not their personalities, but showing what they really look like, showing all the details up close. Here's a couple of dragonflies doing what dragonflies do. An excellent photograph. This was a photograph that just presented itself to me. I was aware, I was situationally aware, I was looking around, I was having lunch on shore, and all of a sudden I saw this branch, this little leaf moving, wondered why it was moving, took a look, and sure enough, there they were. Again, a macro lens really makes a difference here, and selective focus, very narrow depth of field. You gain nothing from that background. If it was in focus, all it would do would be distract from the photograph. Very, very narrow depth of field here to draw attention to the dragonflies, to draw attention to them and away from the background. So getting in close, drawing attention to things, using your depth of field, using your light. I had to move around a little bit to get the light perfect on this, but it was well worth it. Again, some more fish pictures. You know, sometimes it helps to put scale in, adding a hand, adding something in there so that there's scale, so that you understand how big something is or how small it is. This one, again, was just a real quick picture. We just had the fish in the water, raised the fish up, took one photograph, put it back in, swam away. Again, I run into a lot of things when I'm out in nature. Spiders are probably my least favorite thing, besides snakes, which are my #1 least favorite thing. But I do enjoy photographing spiders because there's so many different kinds and they're so beautiful. This one is a little bit strange because I changed the background here. And what you can't see, because it's out of focus, because I did a little selective focusing on this, is that background isn't actually nature, it's actually a gear bag. And the white line that you see going across it is a zipper, which I couldn't quite manipulate out of the photograph, but it is out of focus, so it's not too distracting. The background here was very distracting. It was very light colored, and it didn't add anything to the photograph. So all I did was simply move the gear bag behind the photograph and use that as my new background. What would have been optimal, and sometimes when I'm going out just to do photographs, is would have having a card, 8.5 by 11 or bigger card that was white on one side and black on the other. And that way you can hold it behind things like flowers or insects and webs and figure out which one looks better, whether the white or the black does. And you can simply hold it while you're doing the photograph. That makes a huge difference. Manipulating the light, yes, definitely. Again, perspective is important. These are some sandstone bluffs out in Mason on the Llano River. Very impressive. Everybody that has ever seen them has been impressed by them. There are thousands of little holes in there where there's swallows, and at night when the sun goes down, thousands, literally thousands of swallows fly out of there. It's an impressive sight, but during the height of the day, also a very impressive sight. I waited until a kayaker went through there to place scale on it, because the picture without the kayaker, you have no scale. You really don't understand how tall and massive these are. That kayaker being there makes that image. So don't be afraid to sit, wait till the image is right. Again, waiting on an image. Heading down the river, the light was beautiful. Nice reflections on the water. I knew that they would eventually float right where I wanted them to float, and they did. And I got a bonus because right before I took the photograph, the guide, the gentleman in the back of the canoe, stood up as if on cue, which was perfect, and made the image a little bit stronger than him sitting. So nice photograph. But it didn't happen by accident. It was planned. I waited. Here's a kind of a grab shot on the Blanco River. Again, you'll be presented with all kinds of lighting. Remember, light is your paintbrush. That's all you have to work with. And so understanding what it's doing, understanding how to manipulate it. The one thing I did manipulate in this photograph was the ripples on the water. When I got there into this little channel, the water was dead calm. And to add a little bit of intrigue or a little bit of interest to it, I just simply threw a rock in it and waited for the ripples to die down to the level I wanted them. And it made a much nicer picture with the ripples on the water. Let's see here. Again, another ice picture. We get ice so rarely in Texas, I kind of go ballistic every time we do. And I run out with my cameras and take as many ice pictures as I can. just a few more of those. There we go. And here's a good example of changing your perspective, changing what you're looking at and your angle at which you're looking at it. Here's a big picture of this little berry bush. Not really a great image, I don't think. There's no real focus here. It's kind of busy. Your eyes kind of going all over the place. Just kind of a tough picture to look at. Whereas this one, much more focused. I moved in closer. I found a couple berry clusters where there were little icicles hanging off of them. And the difference between this image and this image is pretty stark. So simply starting with this, I ended with this. By shooting around, I call it shooting around. I shot maybe 15, 20 images of one thing. I explored every angle that I could think of, up, down, sideways, using the light all the time to show the translucence of that ice. But you have to kind of shoot around. You have to take some time. You have to try different angles. And again, that's why digital photography is so great. It costs you nothing. I shot 40 pictures maybe of this whole thing, 15, 20 minutes of work. And all it did was cost me time. It cost me nothing because all the other ones, I just deleted them or I just stuck them in my archive and held on to them. But it doesn't cost you anything. It's super easy to do. I definitely guarantee, want you to try this. And here's another example where I moved my body position and the lens position to negate the background. The background is just a bunch of green trees. I dropped them down in exposure a little bit so that they're almost black. That really shows that ice on those branches. Again, we get ice so rarely that between the fish pictures and the ice pictures, you're probably all bored now. But this image it emits some emotion in people when they see it. They feel that image. They feel how cold and crisp it was that morning. And again, for us in Texas, that's a rare thing. So take advantage of it when you can. Here's something I want to show you about light, and this is important to understand. Everything reflects light. The colors that you see of any object is simply the light that's reflecting from that object. And with something like a butterfly, where their wings are multifaceted, they're multi-surfaced, their color can change simply by the angle in which you photograph them. You look at this photograph and you look at this photograph, that and that. Basically the exact same butterfly. It's the same, it isn't the exact same butterfly, but they looked exactly the same. And simply by changing the angle in which the light hit the butterfly, we go from this basically kind of boring brown butterfly to this incredibly vibrant blue butterfly. This one looked the same from a different angle. It looked just like the one I'm about to show you. Same one. There were two butterflies working this one flower. It all had to do with the angle in which the light was reflecting off the butterfly. And it made a huge difference. And again, it takes time to get these images. You can't just roll up and start taking pictures and expect to get an image that's strong and powerful. It takes a little bit of time, takes a little bit of work. Sometimes you get lucky, sometimes you hit it right off on the first one. Most times it takes a lot of photographs to get the one that you want. Again, different butterfly completely. This one didn't look blue. This one was more black and orange, but same bush. And again, just changing my angle, I can accentuate or decentuate the butterfly, accentuate or decentuate the flower. Much reliant on angles. Looking for things where most people don't see them. One of the things that you learn as a photographer is to pay attention to where you are, situational awareness. Pay attention to your surroundings. Pay attention to what things look like. Look at things a different way. Don't look at them the same way everybody else does. Again, this was early morning. I was starting out on a trip. There were a bunch of elephant ears. And it had rained a little bit that morning, so there was water kind of pooled up in some of them. And I took my camera, put the macro lens on, and I just simply started to look at very small slices of a big image until I found this. And I think I have one more in here. Yeah, there we go. The water was running down the veins into the pools. But these two images, you know, are they award winners? Probably not. Are they nice images? Absolutely. Do they convey a story about what that morning was like? Absolutely. Added into a photo story where there were other pictures, they'd be great accent pictures. But they're standalone. They're nice photographs as is. But those would have never happened had I not been looking for them. It's very easy just to brush by all this stuff and not look. It's very hard to pay attention. And that's what we do. Storytellers, pay attention. Another bird picture. This one, as much as I say you don't get grab shots that work well, this one was kind of a grab shot. The only thing I would change here is if I would have had the presence of mind and the time to do it before he flew away, I would have definitely shallowed up the depth of field and blurred that background as much as I could. Here's a good example of what I just said, blurring the background. We've got the nice flower in the front and the foreground. And again, the background doesn't add anything, so it's just blown away by depth of field control. Same thing here, a little drop of water coming off the little stalk of the plant. Looking at it from a different perspective. You can tell that these plants are in the background. All those little blue plants here are lining the background. But again, I didn't want to show detail in those because it would have been distracting. What was interesting to me was the drop of water. Now, the only thing that has been manipulated in this photograph is that in the very tip of the drop of water, there was an upside down reflection of me taking the photograph, and I got rid of that because that didn't add anything to the image for sure. I've got a face for radio, so I don't need my pictures in anything, but it really kind of ruined the photograph. So a very slight Photoshop job on that. Again, not being afraid to get in close. This big dragonfly landed on a rod that was sitting on the side of the boat, and he didn't seem to be scared of anything. So I had a good opportunity to get some nice photographs of him. But again, very shallow depth of field here. Background was cluttered. I couldn't really move the background. I couldn't move the rod for fear that he would fly away. So I had to manipulate the background from where I was. I had to do something with the background. So dropping it out using depth of field was my attack. Here's an example of fill-in flash. This bird sitting, it's a little heron sitting on the Colorado. And it was pretty much high noon. The light was very harsh and stark. There were a lot of shadows. So to get this photograph, and again, this bird just didn't seem to want to move, didn't really bother him that I was as close as I was. Got real close to him, and I used an electronic flash to kind of even out the shadows and even out the light. It looks like I used a fill-in flash on this, but really that was the only way to get the picture. And he was so close and so beautiful that I really wanted to do that. So fill-in flash would have been a better choice. You know, the lighting would have been better if it would have been natural, but way too stark, way too harsh at that time. So if you want to get this picture, you're going to have to use a fill-in flash. Again, paying attention to your surroundings. We passed by this tree and noticed that it was just loaded with mayflies, hundreds and hundreds of mayflies. And I did a little shoot around on it. I probably shot 15, 20, 30 pictures using very limited depth of field. I just wanted to show the mayflies themselves. The tree was a player, but was not important. The important thing here is the mayflies. And by having some of them sharp and some of them out of focus, I think it adds to the volume of them. It makes them look more massive than they were, although they were quite massive. It was amazing. And the last photograph in the sequence, which unfortunately didn't work out well, was I very gently shook the tree and they all flew away. And I didn't have an appropriate shutter speed, and they were too blurry didn't turn out well as a good photograph. This year, when they come back, I'll definitely pay a little more attention to my shutter speeds. Changing your perspective. A lot of times when you're photographing habitat, it's a great way to go. This is a buddy of mine fishing on the Llano River, and I literally walked up on top of a bridge and shot straight down on him. A perspective that you normally don't see. Again, remember, you're a storyteller. You're trying to tell somebody what you saw, what you experienced, what was there. And so what I saw was this. I didn't see it until I climbed up on top of the bridge. But when I pre-visualized that picture, I thought, you know, what a great angle to shoot him from. And since there was a bridge there available, I just climbed up the bridge, and sure enough, it was a much more powerful picture than anything I could have taken from eye level. So don't be afraid to use your feet. Don't be afraid to move. Don't be afraid to shoot a bunch of different angles. Did I shoot some angles at eye level? You bet. Did I shoot some ones down where he was? You bet. They didn't look anywhere near as powerful as this. Much better image. This is one of his favorite images of himself. Again, spiders, great. You can tell I did a little better on this one. I did replace the background again. This time I used olive green gear bag, and it didn't have a zipper, it did have a crease in it. But again, by isolating the spider away from the cluttered background, you start to see the web. You start to see that zigzag that he's woven into the web. That's important. That's what made this image. The spider's beautiful, yeah, no doubt, but that web is really making it. And without that gear bag that I moved behind there, without that olive backdrop, it doesn't work. So don't be afraid to use what you have on hand. Would it have gone better with a black card or a white card? Absolutely, but I didn't have one. What I had was a waterproof gear bag, and so I just simply moved it behind the spider and waited for him to move into the position I wanted him, and got the photograph. This is two of the last images I'm going to show. One of the great things about digital photography is that it can kind of bail you out of things. I thought this was a powerful image of this water moccasin crawling across the log. Obviously, I didn't want to get in close. And obviously that branch in the foreground is completely distracting and completely terrible and completely gone. With about 2.5 minutes of Photoshop work, we went from that distracting branch, and also notice there's another branch that's the vertical that's gone also. A quick shot from here to here. Don't be afraid to use editing tools. Don't change too much. Don't rely on them. They're not a crutch, but editing tools can be great when you go from this to this, because this image is much more powerful than that image. So don't be afraid to use those when you have an opportunity to do so. So that's all the images I have. Hopefully you've gained a little bit. You kind of understand what's going on. One of the things that I really want to encourage everybody who watches this to do is to get out and shoot. Shoot as much as you can. Shoot everything you can. Shoot in your backyard. Shoot at the park. Take a trip. Go down the river in a kayak and do nothing but take photographs. Don't fish. Don't do, just go out and hone your skill. The only way you are going to get better at being a photographer is doing it. You have to get out and do it. You have to do photographs every day if you can do it, or at least do a little bit of research. Think about things. Go on Pinterest and look at photographs. Go on Instagram and look at people's pages. Follow photographers that you like. I'm on Instagram. I probably follow 60, 70 photographers because I want to see what they're doing. I get ideas from what they do. I take them and I make them my own. I go off on my own little tangents, but you have to do it. You have to get out there and try things. If it seems stupid at the time, no problem. I'll give you a great example. I had a shoot yesterday. It was a fashion shoot. I was shooting with a model, and we were doing a shoot, and I wish I had these photographs to show you, but we were doing the shoot, and I had the lights set up in a very classic portrait, 45-degree angle portrait setup, and I took one of my strobe heads off and laid it on the ground to move the light stand. And when I laid it on the ground, the static electricity set off my camera that was on a tripod, and I got a photograph of her with the light coming directly from below her, a way I would have never done it. It was super harsh shadows. It was, some people would have found it very unflattering, and she saw it and absolutely loved it. And we left the light there and shot probably another 200 images different with that light in that position, with her in different posing. And out of those 200 images, I think we got 6 of them that looked good, and they looked amazing because it was an angle of light that you never see. You never see fashion photos done like that, with the light coming from the bottom, because it gives you harsh shadows. It accentuates your face. If you have any imperfections on your face, it's going to really make them look bad. Luckily, she didn't, but that was something that was just a happy accident. You know, Bob Ross and his happy accidents. It was a happy accident. But once I saw it, once she saw it, once we both agreed that it looked great, we took off with it, shot another 200 images, came up with 6 or 7 that we liked. That's what this is about. This isn't about every single photograph you take being National Geographic quality. This is about you getting out there, practicing, spending time behind the lens, thinking about what you're doing, trying to pre-plan your photographs, understanding what the light is doing. For those of you that watch this, Photo Fest is coming up on Saturday. I'm going to be taking some train tours around Smithville, and we're going to be photographing some buildings. All I'm going to talk about, and I'm sure the people will be very bored, is light. I'm just going to talk about what the light's doing with the building, because that is our tool. Light is our tool. We have to understand it. We have to master it. We have to be able to manipulate it. Light is everything. And so please take what I've shown you today, go out and practice. If you have any questions, I'm sure they'll put some identifier on this video so that you can get a hold of me. Follow me on Instagram, send me an email, whatever. I'll give April all that information so they can put it up. But I'd love to hear from you. I'd love to see some of the images. If you're having problems, I'd love to help you. So get out, do some photographs. That's all I can tell you. So thanks for watching. Hope you enjoyed it, and come out to Photo Fest. All right, thanks. Mhm. Okay. It feels like college. Yeah.
Thank you, Kevin. Sure, whatever you think. Yeah, you can have one big room or you can close it off. And one side can be your lab side and one side can be a. I absolutely agree with that. I just don't want to. My concern, and I certainly don't want to say this anywhere than between us, is I don't want to